panel, and we'll dive in. But first, I just wanted to once again thank our panelists for being here and thank our MMSD folks for taking time today as well to join us. This will be recorded, so any people back at your sites who are not able to join us today, let them know that they will benefit from this as well if they can view the recording. If we could start maybe with our folks from Savannah Oaks in Verona doing some introductions, your name and your role. I know that it appears in how you've renamed yourselves, but if you could share that just verbally as well, that would be helpful. Paris, would you mind starting us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. Paris Echols, principal at Savannah Oaks Middle School in Verona.
All right, Steph.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Sims. I am the educational technology coach and curriculum and learning specialist at Savannah Oaks.
All right, Martha, over to you.
Hi, I'm Martha Van Arsdale. I am a 7th grade language arts teacher at Savannah.
Okay. And is it Cecily?
Yes, it is. Hi, I'm Cecily. I am the art teacher at Savannah Oaks. I teach grades 6 through 8, and I will be representing the related arts staff in our building.
Okay. And Cheryl.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Motlett. I teach 8th grade science, typically physics and chemistry as our focus.
Okay. So thanks once again, you all, for joining us. So here's how this is going to go for the time that we have together. I will ask a question, and then panelists, you may answer or not, as the spirit moves you, I guess, would be how I would say it. So if you feel that you have something to offer or to share, feel free to weigh in with that. And then for our MMSD folks, there is a document that I'll put in the chat in a little while, where there will be space for you to add in your own questions, and we will share that document back with central office folks so that we have kind of a repository of questions that are top of mind and top of heart for you all, so that we can make sure that we are working on addressing those questions for you. Okay. All right. So first question for our panel, as you consider concurrent teaching, what do you know now that you wish you'd known earlier? And what has helped with easing any fears that you might have had?
I can answer that. I can try. I knew ahead of time we had to be extremely flexible, but not even close to what I need now. You have to have a lot of tools in your bag and read your audience and read what's happening throughout in person and virtually, and see what the kids need. So you have to have a lot of plans, and the flexibility to work with those plans is key.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I can speak to that. One thing I can say is that, at least from my perspective, it's not as challenging as I envisioned it would be. I can say that it's certainly not an ideal situation. You are doing a lot of balancing between the students that are virtual and the students that are in the room, and trying to make sure that everybody's needs are met, everybody's heard. But it is doable. I think for me, knowing that you can start with the basics, and what I mean by that is having the students that are in the room logging into the Zoom along with the students who are virtual and participating in the lesson together as a group, keeping it very simple, and then adding in more technology as you become more comfortable as you go. To me, that was really doable, and it was like, okay, I can do this thing, and then I can just keep adding as I go along. Practicing also is very helpful. Practicing with colleagues, making sure that you have all those technological bits put together helps as well.
Yeah, I would agree with what both Cheryl and Cecily said. Initially start out the way you have been teaching. Don't change it up for the learners. That's really important. But also know to give yourself grace, but they come with grace. They're so willingly waiting for what you're going to show them, but they also know that. But so be kind to yourself, especially those first couple weeks. But then also, if there's somebody in your school who you really like how their classroom looks, or you like how their flow of their classroom has been, go see how they've set up their concurrent teaching, so that you can practice that. That was really big for me. I went in and saw other classrooms, so then I could visually kind of have a picture in my mind of how it would go.
Can I add to that very quickly? I would agree. I didn't get a chance to go into many other classrooms, but Stephanie provided some photographs of some of the setups that other staff members had in their rooms. And just in seeing that and seeing, how they were, using the iPad to be able to use it as a second camera to highlight the whiteboard in the classroom, or whatever it might be. Just seeing the different setups of the different classrooms was very helpful to me as a visual person.
I think for me as a coach in this situation, what I wish I had known earlier is not something you could know ahead of time, but people said just that as soon as the students were back in school and in front of you, it would feel a little bit better. And so there is so much worrying and planning that goes into getting ready for the concurrent teaching. And we heard that it would feel better, and that really did prove to be true. I appreciate too that Martha mentioned grace, and we've heard patience and practice. I think those are kind of my 3 rules to live by. There is going to be a day where the technology doesn't work out, or the lesson doesn't go as well as you expect, or something happens that you couldn't anticipate. And so pausing, taking a breath, focusing in on the relationships that you've built with the students, the routines that you've used to get your classroom going, all of the building blocks that are part of good teaching, no matter if you're virtual or in person, and just stepping back and relying on those pieces to carry you through have helped to ease, I think, a lot of the fears.
Can I add one more thing to that? I never thought the students would be as technologically helpful as they are. They chime in and let you know, like, hey, I don't see that, or hey, they're giving us, well, me, hints on how to do things better. And I didn't consider that. And I think they're a very valuable voice.
From an administrative perspective, I just feel that leaning into what Martha uplifted in terms of just how our brilliant scholars are there, ready to learn, waiting for you to continue to do what you do and have been doing your entire careers, which is, lead and facilitate learning in the classroom. And this idea of me thinking about what I wish I would have known is how much more we should have and continue to still fuel the confidence, work with teachers, and the mindset, work with teachers around I can do this, I have this, and I stand away from this perfectionism that we have around, I'm a teacher, I'm expected to know all these things. What if I don't know them? And then the amount of stress that can cause. We've done a lot of work But again, you hear the word grace, you hear the word pause and reflecting. I'm really building that into the culture because everyone is trying to learn something brand new that we have not done before, and to approach it in a way that makes it seem like somebody's expected to know something or expect to know how to do something is only going to cause more fear to arise and more stress. So just really being intentional around language, around how we support individuals, and at the end of the day, letting folks know, no matter what happens in that classroom, like we're going to be able to try it again and be okay with what we learn from those mistakes and make it better for the next time.
Thanks you all for your thoughts on that. All right, our next several questions deal with or ask about the planning aspects of the work. And so our first question is, what do you need to more closely attend to in your planning for concurrent instruction that is different from how you planned for instruction previously? And as you talk about this, just thinking about both the just academics in general, as well as what you are accounting for or planning for in terms of technology.
As we were getting ready to make the move to concurrent teaching, one of the first parts to consider was that we just continue to rely on our LMS, our learning management system, as our way of getting work out to students or having them interact with what they needed for learning that day. And so not thinking of it as planning separately or differently, but considering it as one classroom still. And so I have children in the Verona, or I'm sorry, in the Madison School District. So I believe that many of you use Google Classroom. And so continuing to rely on that platform as your way of sharing the videos, sharing the slides, sharing the work that the students need, the plans for the day, that would be one of the building blocks. I think the other part for concurrent instruction that's different is just being intentional about setting aside time where you are specifically talking with the students in the Zoom and setting aside time where you're specifically talking with students in the room. So when you have your mini lesson or you have your whole group lesson done, even if it's just a 5 or 10 minute chunk where you are not splitting your attention, but you're focusing on each group individually. And finally, just making sure that you have a way that you are still tracking your interaction or thinking about, have I conferenced with that student recently? Have I interacted with that student recently? Did that student chat today? Because there are a lot of moving pieces, just again, making sure that you're putting that attention on keeping those relationships going and being intentional around making that time to talk or individually check in or small group check in with students.
I would say I'm very planning that initial activity for kids even more than you did when they were all virtual, a unifying activity that gives you a chance to see them all, talk with them all, have them all talk to each other, but also some of the logistics. You have to really slow down in the beginning, more than completely, like really slow down in the beginning. You have to, maybe they're a little bit late to class and you have to get them, maybe you have to attend to something in front of you. But if you have that bonding activity in the beginning, that gives you a little bit of wiggle room, that helps a lot.
I will often put students in breakout rooms after the initial lesson is taught, and then I can work with students individually within those breakout rooms. Our district provided a set of headphones with a microphone so that when I go into those breakout rooms to work with my students, there's a little bit more privacy. I'm not really projecting into the classroom. And so therefore I'm the only one who can hear what that student is saying in the breakout room. And then my voice is quieter because I have that built-in microphone there. And so the students in the room are busy, you know, they're doing the activity that we've planned for the day. And I can then purposefully go into those breakout rooms and either work with small groups of students or work with individual students and do check-ins in that way. And sometimes I'll even do that with the students in the room as well, especially if I'm trying to have an individual conversation with a student and I don't, you know, I don't want the neighboring students to be a part of that conversation. So sometimes I'll even have the roomers, we call them the roomers, right? The roomers be a part of those breakout rooms as well. And they can also interact sometimes in small groups then with the virtual students within those breakout rooms. So I recommend all of that.
And I would just add, like what Cheryl was saying, like when I have a New York Times puts out a photo every day, it's called What's Going On in This Picture, that I'll have it projected. So if people come in the Zoom late, I'll say perfect timing. We're just looking at, you know, this picture. So it's not, no one's late or anything like that. But then we also have a QR code that they scan if they need to use, they need to leave the room to go to the bathroom or whatever it is. And so I told the kids that are in the room ahead of time that, you know, just raise your hand and then I'll just kind of give you like the low thumbs up and then you can go. So it's hard for kids when they're back in class, like they're not sure, like, how do I leave the room but I don't want everyone to know I'm leaving. So I kind of just laid a lot of those ground rules or guidelines and not really rules. That first week, like Cheryl said, just going through a lot of things like we don't think about, but for a middle schooler, might be a big deal. And then I do go into the breakout rooms and I usually the first question, I don't go immediately into language arts. I'll ask them about, you know, something that's happened, like what'd you have for lunch? Yeah, something like that, just to make a conversation.
We've all, in some way, shape, or form, may have heard or are familiar with, or in some way heard a different version of, you know, the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. And I think as you listen to Cheryl talk about slowing down, the ability when you are moving slower to not fall back into old patterns and routines, which one for us as educators is, you know, we've been doing it for so long and it's second nature. So there's a tendency to believe when it comes to actually prepping, like I can just move forward how I have in the past and get away with the work panning out for me. I think it's really important for us to understand in this work, like with us not doing it before, it's almost like taking yourself back and like forcing yourself to understand. Like I remember when I was that first year, second year, third year teacher doing the work and how much time it took to really not only understand the content and work and how to do school, but also just the actual drain and mental energy it took to actually get used to the new way of like moving and living. So I think the more we actually, you know, think about that preparation ahead of time and slow down, and know that it's time well spent. It's very, very valuable and has worked for us. And then I think another huge piece as it relates to the planning aspect is like collaboration. A lot of our teachers, you know, this entire school year have been collaborating, not just internally with our own great staff here, but also with the other middle school staff at Badger Ridge. And just that collaboration of understanding that, you know, we all are only bringing our experience and our perspective to the table. And the more we can tap into our colleagues who are also like going through the process and seeing how they're utilizing new learnings, with how they're practicing, how are they actually planning on doing the work, will help ease some of that stress that we have thinking that we got to figure it all out on our own. And I think that that's also important to know, right? That can be across, you know, levels, vertical and horizontal. You know, the elementary school for us was very helpful in us getting ready to open up because they opened up first. So, you know, we spent time, you know, within their building, seeing how they're doing it, just to even see what concurrent teaching can look like and feel like. So when thinking about planning and thinking about the best way to set yourself up for success, understanding that slowing down and taking time to collaborate and ask questions with your colleagues who are also going through the same thing will be time well spent.
Can I speak to more specifics related to, and I know a lot of these are going to be specific to my subject area, but they may apply to other areas as well. One of them is in planning for lessons that take place. I had to be very conscious of equity with students and the fact that there are students who are all virtual. There are students who I will see in the classroom, but I'm only going to see those students one day. I don't know how all of your schedules are going to apply, but I will only see those students in person once per week. And then the other day that I have those students is a virtual day for those students. So I have to be really conscious of like how I'm making use of supplies for lessons within my classroom. So an example of that is, a big part of my curriculum is working with clay, right? And it's something that students absolutely love. But the fact that the students who are all virtual don't have access to those kinds of materials, I had to essentially take that out of my curriculum. We were able to create small art kits for students so that every student would have the same materials. And so I think just being conscious of that as a part of this whole discussion, and realizing that you might not be able to do exactly the same things that you've done before. And just thinking about what your students have access to outside of school versus in the classroom. Another thing is, as an art teacher, because they have art kits that we provided to them, and I only see them one day out of the week, they have to transport their art kits and their art projects per se to school on the day that they attend school. And then they need to take those home with them on the day that, or when they return to their virtual setting. So that's another thing to think about. And if you have a better system that you can share with me, please let me know, because that's what we have to do. That's what's been working so far. The other piece that I wanted to bring up is, if you have a way to have a separate device that you can use as a camera to be able to assist you in your lessons, I highly recommend that. So for instance, most of my lessons are taught through my laptop in my classroom, but I also have an iPad. And so I use the iPad to do live demonstrating. And so any way that you can have multiple devices to assist you in this process is highly recommended.
A few things I wanted to highlight as well is what Cheryl mentioned, just taking time, especially at the beginning of class, to just focus on connecting with students. So it's not necessarily content related, although it may be, but time for students to talk to each other. We've done a lot of asking students for feedback on a pretty regular basis. And we, in general, hear from half to 2/3 of our students when we ask. And many of them share that having opportunities to connect with their teacher, having opportunities to connect with other students, playing games, doing community building, those are the parts of the day that are important to them, the most important. And so really taking that time, especially in the beginning, but throughout this time, to help people feel connected. As I've been doing walkthroughs in teachers' classrooms, I am very impressed with how teachers are able to shift their focus. So whether it's alternating questioning, okay, this time I'm going to hear from someone in the room. Next time I'm going to hear from someone in the Zoom. Using things like cold calling where they, say, I'm going to pull the old popsicle sticks or whatever method you use, but just, okay, here's who's on deck. Here's who I'm talking to. Using the chat still to continue to interact with students. So letting that be a place for kids in the room and the Zoom to participate in class. It is a little bit of juggling, but then that's also where you can get students involved too. So having a chat monitor or a student who uses his or her camera to video the demonstration and share it with the rest of the class, or a student present something. So just really using that classroom community again to help. And don't be afraid to ask the students, because they for sure have ideas on what they could do to help you with the class.
I know this my notes are for a future question, but it is very, very most productive by surveying the kids. We survey them every Friday. Roomers and well, they're not roomers and Zoomers. Virtuals. What worked this week? Do you have any suggestions? And there was a lot of suggestions. We're doing some science labs in which kids are partners. When they're here, they could be a partner with a 100% virtual person, and they love doing that. But then I also got feedback that says we would love to do some things at home in addition to that. And I knew that they would, but it's once they voice that, like, I want to do more and I want to do things at home too. That's what's getting us thinking and planning on how we can make that happen for them too.
And I guess from like the language arts standpoint, we've continued. So we started just using digital notebooks, and that way everybody had it. We could see with their work, we could go in and do that. And then within that digital notebook, just make sure, your learners have, a printed version, auditory version, and a visual, it just, with that equity piece, you just want to make sure they can access information in all assets.
All right, thank you all for the ideas, the suggestions, the experiences that you shared there. I think some of that sounds hopefully comforting and familiar to us in MMSD as we think about practices that we are already doing in our virtual setting, and even when we were face-to-face, that we can just continue to strengthen and reground ourselves in, and just continue to refine and grow in. And then some things also that we need to just be mindful of, as we have two groups of students in two different locations now, whether we call them roomers and Zoomers, or roomies and zoomies, or whatever we decide on. All right, our next question is what strategies, then kind of building off of where I think we're going earlier, is what strategies are you using to keep both groups engaged? So wherever they're meeting us at, whether they're at home on Zoom or in classrooms, how are you working to keep both groups of students engaged?
Well, I do what, like Steph was saying, I split up talking with, asking questions for those at home, those in the room. I give somebody at home a co-host. I can let them be the co-host so they can help me with monitoring chats and any hands being raised if I'm not catching them. And then I also have a videographer in my classroom. So occasionally they can take their iPad and pan the room so that the kids at home can see stuff that's happening there, since they can't get up, but they can kind of, they like it. They get down on a knee or they can stand up, but it gives usually those are kids who need a little bit of a movement break. So I give them that videographer spot.
I will often do the same thing, although I typically use my iPad stand, and I will just position my iPad as, I will log my iPad into the Zoom as well, and I will position it facing the classroom, and then I will often kind of pan the room, or sometimes I'll just change the outlet, let it sit in a certain position for a while, and then I'll move it occasionally throughout the class period. But that way the students who are virtual can see the students in the classroom and what they're doing and how they're interacting, and it just helps them to feel a part of the class. I also said that, or I also wrote down that I use video demonstrations and sometimes live demonstrations. Virtual games are often used quite a bit. Having my students doing hands-on activities, whether they're at home or whether they're in the classroom, as much as I can. Yeah, those are some of the strategies.
I think ahead of time, I know even when I come to a meeting, I like to know the agenda and the game plan. I always tell everybody in the space what the intention of the, like, we're going to do this first, this activity, then we're going to have one of these, and then we're going to do a little break, and then we're going to do one of these. I mean, it's flexible and fluid and it can change, but I think sometimes the anxious kids, even in the space that you're with, they want to know, the live kids want to know what's happening. And then if I'm meeting with the virtual kids, they want to know that that's going to happen at some point. So then they know what they're going to do. So I think giving them a game plan, and that's, I mean, we all do that, but giving them a game plan even more about what the intention of the class is very helpful.
I think, Martha spoke to something that I want to make sure we, heard and uplift, which is part of the larger conversation around how are we keeping students engaged, depending on the representative groups. She talked about having a student who potentially need movement and need to actually move around, and or thinking about other roles that you are creating in your classroom based on like who your students are, and still thinking about culturally responsive, linguistically responsive practices. Like that doesn't go away because we are now up against a new way of teaching, and with technology involved in the process. I think we have to start asking ourselves, like, what are we prioritizing, and what are we actually asking ourselves as it relates to like who represents each population, right? Like for us, like it's like knowing our data around who's at home, who's coming into the building. What does race have to do with that? What does that mean for the experience of students at home or at school, and like actually spending time and talking through what does it mean if you are having, a large majority of your Black and brown students staying home? What does that mean for your actual teaching approach? What does that mean in terms of your actual planning and prep when it comes to like, how are you going to engage with students in the classroom, especially your Zoomers, when you're still also thinking about achievement gaps and equity and knowing who actually succeeds and who doesn't? So there's still a piece of really thinking about, from a teacher standpoint, that work that we've been working on and have been doing, and, thinking about Madison, thinking about Verona, essentially our entire country, right? Like there are certain students who historically have not succeeded. If anything, COVID has widened that gap. It's our responsibility to still, again, slow down and be intentional with our classroom community building structures that may have in the past, like, oh, I got time with the students and I'll get to know them in person and I'll just take the time, 10 seconds each day with each kid, or a minute each day, each kid, and think over time that relationship can happen. Like it takes some intentionality now around, once you know your population, once you know where students are where, and you still trying to do the same work as an educator, we can't like sit and wait and think time is going to actually handle that. We have to be intentional with our community building, daily, especially when you got half of the population with you and another half outside of the actual four walls of the building.
If I could, one more comment, what Paris had said, getting to meet the kids, and I don't know what the layout of your schedule is going to be, getting to meet the kids on a Tuesday or Wednesday makes that Thursday, Friday that they're virtual so much better. You understand the kids that are out there a lot better, and they acknowledge what's when they're in your face and you're having a conversation with them, they acknowledge what some challenges are at home, and the 8th graders know, they know their challenges at home and they share them with you. So you have such a better understanding of the kids when you had a chance. Now that doesn't, we still have to work harder on the 3rd that are virtual, but at least you have that win as far as getting to know them a little bit better and interacting the opposite days better.
And I think you said, Cheryl, you mentioned as well, right? Like it's the humbling of the self to be able to even ask students the question around providing feedback to us related to what it is that we need to be working on, right? Again, like that idea of like power dynamics. I'm the adult, I know, you the student, you learn. 2021 in this technology, this is their world, this is their way of understanding and being. It's up to us to like actually humble ourselves to ask the questions that we know will actually not only better our experience, but like help the students who are coming to us, and then potentially students who are being a voice for other students that we may not hear from, but based on their experience can help us make sure we're trying to meet the needs of all learners, regardless of roomer, Zoomer, Jan said roomies, zoomies, whatever lingo you're using. At the end of the day, like we know we have certain students doing different experiences. So we have to ask, what they need and what's going on, because we're only one person and one experience, which is happening in the 4 walls of our building.
All right. So this next question actually directly stems from what we are talking about, is thinking about how we are really attending to our students and their needs, and being very intentional around that. So the next question is, in what ways have you been explicit around planning for and attending to students' social emotional needs specifically during this transition?
In preparation for the transition, we had several middle school and high school committees that came together to plan for. And a big part of that planning was, how do we help support students a lot through just information. There were videos that were made. There was a lot of discussions that happened, intentional social emotional check-ins. So I think the first piece is just making sure that you're planning for the students and communicating with the students and checking in with the students throughout. And I think that begins before it happens and it continues after. We've mentioned a few times that we do seek feedback, and Cheryl kind of intimated students are pretty honest on the feedback. And so we're not getting necessarily, what I would say is we're getting exactly what we want, which is some honest ideas about how we can do things better. And then following up on that, or saying, reaching out to the students who are giving that feedback, or checking in with students that we haven't heard from in a while to get feedback. When it came to conference time, our administrators really prioritized trying to contact as many families as we can. And by that, I mean all families, to offer a conference and to say, this is a time where in spring, a lot of times we've said conferences are optional, but this time we said we'd like to conference with everyone, just to really get that check-in with families and students and see how are things going in this time of concurrent teaching. So I think there just has to be a lot of intentionality around that, checking in with students as much as we can, and however that can look.
With those check-ins, they're typically not a rank yourself 1 to 6. They're an open-ended, give us your honest opinions, give us your sentences, tell us. I mean, you're going to get, sometimes I'm good, it's fine, but sometimes you're going to get some real meat. And you hopefully have that relationship in which the kids feel like they can give you the meat. But most importantly too, their answers to these check-ins, if it's done not verbal, I mean, if it's done on a form, on a Google form or something, they have to know that we're going to follow up on it. It's not just going to go out into the world. Like we're going to good, I mean, whatever positive, and if they need anything, we'll follow up with them on that.
And I don't know if it goes with the social emotional, but for the roomers, kids in the room, reading their body language, a lot of times, especially if they maybe they're anxious, wearing a face mask all day and then putting on headphones is really confining for them. And then they'll get fidgety and, so a lot of times because they'll ask me, can I have a face mask break? And I'm like, no, you can't have a face mask break, but you can take, your headphones off. You can we do some shoulder shrugs. We just, it's as silly as it is, but they're not used to wearing, for 8 hours, that mask can raise their anxiety a little bit.
I think too, you've heard all three teachers mention how they use breakout rooms and individual check-ins and conferencing with students. In the times that I've been in classrooms, those check-ins and those conferences start with, how are you? Or it's so good to see you. Let's check in quickly. So again, that prioritization of the student's social emotional needs over, hey, we got to talk about this science lab. there's the student comes first, and whenever you get a chance to talk with a student one-on-one, whether it's virtual or in person, what I see is teachers really making sure that those check-ins happen.
I'd like to add to the breakout room piece, and that is that, I feel like the students really need time for socialization as a part of all of this. And I will often, and I know a lot of you are already doing this as a part of your virtual experience, and that is, allowing students to be in a breakout room with a friend or in a small group with chosen individuals. I just think they need opportunities for that. And so although I don't do it with every experience, I try to do it often. Also, giving them the option of choosing whether or not they want to go into a breakout room. I will often set up a number of breakout rooms, and then if they want to go into a breakout room of their own because they want that space to work, they can do that. If they would like to go into a breakout room with a friend or a small group, they can do that. If they want to stay in the main Zoom, they can do that. So just offering those choices, that also seems to help.
Yeah, any school experience, and especially after, more than, from a calendar standpoint, a year of being out of school for students, like that socialization that Cecily just mentioned is huge. Students miss their friends, students miss school, the fun aspects of school, the day in and day out things that happen that bring them joy. And so it was very important for us to make sure we intentionally made opportunities for that to happen. We have a what I need period at the end of the day, the last hour of the day, and it's tweaking those systems to ensure that, as Cecily talked about, students have choice to, some Monday, or maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday, they want to just, silently read. Other days they may want to go into a group and work with their friends as a study group, right? Like, how are you building time into your structures to also meet the needs that students have as it relates to, the other aspects of school that are fun. I think the other piece, when we talk about social emotional, is the realization that a lot has been going on in our students' lives since COVID has happened, especially thinking about a lot of the racial tension and things that are happening, taking place around them. And if our schools have been for some and continue to be healing spaces for students, how are you going to prioritize these courageous conversations and bring them into the space so students can have dialogue around these real world things that are going on that potentially are causing it and contributing to anxiety, stress, and things of that nature, for they can see my school is a place that understands these things, values me, and uplifts me, and want to talk about these different things happening, where is so quick to just think of current teaching, academic, technology, how are we doing breakout rooms for the work and the exams and the formative summative assessments, where we really have to be thinking about, like, fundamentally, at the end of the day, students are going to remember what their experience was like in middle school. They may not remember the exact lessons of the concurrent teaching that happened in 2021. So just thinking about how are we increasing opportunities for that bonding to happen. We actually changed our structure for student clubs and groups to happen on our asynchronous Monday, because we know that these are important opportunities for affinity groups for certain students and populations to have that experience happening. And we as a school community want to be a part of uplifting that and supporting that work happening, not believing that it's the community's responsibility, but actually fostering a true school community experience for our youth here at Savannah Oaks.
Along with that, I wish my roomers could interact with my Zoomers more, and they were kind of like, we're here, we want to be here, we don't want to be here. So what we do a lot of house. So within our house, we like our win period, everybody's in there, not just your 25 or 30 kids that have been interacting since September together. Give those opportunities as well. And I don't know if this would work for you guys. We're actually bonding with the other middle school to do some science activities too, because they're going to be in the class in next year together. And the thought as an old lady scared me, but it is so smooth. This world of doing things like that is so much smoother than I had envisioned it to be.
We aren't old, Cheryl, we're vintage. That's what I tell my kids. All right. Thank you all. So we have one final, like, pre-planned question, which relates to just student supports. And so thinking about what student needs are arising during this time, what supports have been helpful, and you all certainly have spoken to some of the systems and things that you have implemented or reorganized, restructured already. But wondering if there are more things that you might offer as you think about things that you've put in place both within your classroom as well as at the school-wide level. So what are the student needs that are arising, and then supports that you've put in place both within your classrooms and at the school-wide level?
I can go. When you have kids in front of you, the kids on the screen who you used to be able to meet their needs somewhat immediately. I think one of the things that we really are trying to stress is being resourceful. What could you do if you can't get your question answered immediately? Where could you go? We use Canvas, and I mean, I would love to answer their question immediately, but when you're kind of maybe meeting with the roomers for a little while or checking in with the Zoomers for a little while, being proactive on what you could do and teaching those skills, because those are not natural skills. Where could you go? What could you do if you needed something?
What one is not going to be cold? Will there be a little cold?
I think I can go back to, that talking about that social piece, providing opportunities for your students to meet outside of the school day for connection, having clubs where students can gather and socialize, that has been needed. And we were able to move all of our after school clubs to our asynchronous Mondays, so that we wouldn't have the issue with bussers at the end of the day not being able to attend and so on. So that seems to be working fairly well, but just having those opportunities is very helpful. And and I think just overall providing opportunities where the roomers and the Zoomers can converse together and do some community building or doing some fun activities as a part of their day.
Yeah, I would say that we talk a lot. We're trying to promote self-advocacy, and so I was trying to, like Cheryl was saying, like, so what is it that if I can't get to right away, what are your resources? And then somebody said, well, I don't really like to ask. You know, and I thought, oh, maybe that's a vulnerability thing, right? Like, so then I was like, well, why don't you just tell me? And so when I switched over to tell me, you know, that, or I could tell them, like, can I have you work 5 minutes on that while I'm this? I think there's little things, you know, sometimes it's just a word, you know, that can change things. But when we first started, all the kids at home wanted to know how lunch and recess went. And everybody who was in the classroom just said, it's weird. It's so weird. And then they talked about the difference. I mean, that's really what kids want to know, right? Like and so they were talking about how quiet it was. And so Paris brought in his soundboard and now plays some music. And now the topic is like, what are you guys listening to in the cafeteria? You know, so little things like that. Because when we first walked down and I said, oh, Mr. Eccles is going to have some music going, they said, Miss V, please tell me it's not mindfulness music. And I said, I don't know what it's going to be, but you'll have to find out. So they're very pleased it's not just mindfulness music. But, you know, that's something they're talking about now. That's what they wanted to know. They were afraid they were missing out on something about lunch and recess.
Those are hot topics.
From being a new leader in the building here in Verona, the truth still remains that student needs around belonging, inclusivity, am I seen, am I heard? Do my teachers care about me? Is it only a check for them? Do they only care about their content? Is their stresses more important than like what's going on in my life? Like those things are all student needs that are still arising, and that goes across, race, class, ability, right, gender. And this is a matter of us continuing to have ongoing conversations and keeping those type of topics at the forefront of what we're doing and what we're trying to engage in. Again, there's a lot of things happening. Change is hard. We all trying to learn a new system, and it can be very easy to, get sucked into just focusing on all the technological pieces of what this change may be. And then, selfishly for us as adults to think all about how many things we have to change and how much time it's going to take, and forget like that, fundamentally we are in this work to serve young people, and to serve young people is to consistently find out, what those needs are and consistently ask. And I think so from a system school-wide level for us, right now is just the asking, like, what is it that you need? What is it what can we change? Steph talked about, we, prioritize again, spring conference is not optional. Like not just an email out. We want you to make contact and actually talk to families and students around what's going on and what we can do better. And it's that consistent, we talk about Kobe and the Mamba mentality, like every single day. Savannah Oaks, we're trying to be better at this concurrent teaching hybrid thing. Like it doesn't stop, it doesn't change. And I think students knowing that we're trying to do that every day opens up a different culture of conversation where they feel more open to having those conversations around what they need when they see us actually trying to lean into the very things that they say, doesn't work. Lunch is boring. Boom, let's bring in some music. It helps us, it helps them, and it helps us. So again, ultimately, it's a duality in what's needed. We have needs as adults, yes, we do, and students have them as well, and we all can preach if their needs are met and they're happy and they're in a good place of learning. Our lives are a lot easier regardless if it's concurrent, hybrid, full day, 2015 or 2021. Those things remain the same. So continue to prioritize relationships, prioritizing, everybody being seen and heard, uplifting who they are, their identity, and bringing joy. Those things don't change regardless of who you have in front of you, how you have them in front of you.
All right, so I'm looking at the time and we are about out of it. So I just want to call your attention to a couple of things. First of all, there are 2 docs in the chat. One is some resources that were shared from the folks at Savannah Oaks. The other one is a document where you all can feel free to add in questions that you have. And with that said, really, I just want to extend my thank you to our panelists for taking time out to be with us today and help us on our journey. And thank you to all of the folks from MMSD for joining us as well. We will get the recording shared out so that everyone has access to this. I will stay on. I think Jamie can stay on as well if people have additional questions.
But SMMS folks, thank you again. I know when I came to you with the ask, you probably didn't know what to expect, who was going to be here or not, and you all agreed to be a part of this panel to help our fellow colleagues. So I just wanted to say thank you for all that you are continuing to do around here and all the great work that makes Savannah Oaks Savannah Oaks.